Have you ever felt lonely even when surrounded by people? It's curious, isn't it? We live in a noisy world, full of voices, screens, and distractions, yet from time to time we feel that emptiness. Loneliness is often seen as a shadow, something to avoid, as if it represents failure or weakness. But what if we're looking at it the wrong way? What if I told you that loneliness is not the end, but a beginning? That behind the silence lies a powerful opportunity, a unique chance to find something no one else can offer, our true essence. Think about it. What happens when you quiet everything around you? When notifications stop, the voices fade, and you're left alone with yourself. It may feel uncomfortable at first, I know, but it's in that discomfort that we find the deepest truths, the ones hidden within, waiting for the right moment to emerge. What if loneliness was a doorway? A doorway that once crossed reveals not only our weaknesses, but also our strengths, our dormant dreams and desires we barely dare to admit. This time alone is like a mirror, and in it, we see not just who we are, but who we can become. Loneliness offers us a rare gift, the space to listen to ourselves, to stop looking for answers outside and find them within. It's a journey of self-discovery that requires courage. Facing our own thoughts, doubts, and uncertainties isn't easy. But it's through this process that transformation is born. Imagine yourself as a traveler who, after losing sight of everything and everyone, finally finds the way inward. You don't need to fear this moment of solitude. It isn't a sign of weakness. It's a chance to strengthen your mind, soul, and purpose. The world outside will always remain noisy, and it's easy to get swept up in distractions. But the answers you seek, the ones that truly matter, aren't out there. They're here within you, and to hear them, you must learn to be still. So, the next time loneliness knocks at your door, don't run. Open it. Allow yourself to be in that quiet space. Explore what arises when the world pauses. This is the moment when you stop being a spectator and become the protagonist of your own story. After all, isn't it in the absence of company that we find our freedom? It's in silence that we learn to value our own voice, and through it, we can grow and evolve. The world can wait, but the person you have the potential to become depends on the choices you make now. And you, are you ready to meet yourself? You see, when we allow ourselves to embark on this journey of introspection, we discover that loneliness is not a singular, uniform experience. It takes on different forms, each carrying a specific lesson for our personal growth. But what happens when we begin to understand the nature of this loneliness? What if each type of it guided us toward a different aspect of our existence, the past, the future, and even the divine? This is exactly what Robert Johnson teaches us. Now, let's explore these three facets of loneliness, three ways of living through this state that, far from being an obstacle, can become a powerful compass for life. Loneliness has many layers. Robert Johnson, a renowned Jungian analyst, believed there are three main types of loneliness. Each reveals something about us, what we value, what we fear, and most importantly, what we seek. 1. Loneliness of the past, the weight of nostalgia. Who hasn't wished to go back in time, to relive a moment when everything felt simpler, safer? The loneliness of the past is like looking back and wanting to take refuge in a place that no longer exists. It could be the certainty-filled days of childhood or the comfort of a relationship that's now gone. But like a mirage in the desert, the past is unreachable. If we cling too tightly to it, we risk becoming paralyzed. This nostalgia can damage current relationships, sabotage careers, and lead us to believe that happiness is behind us. And the key lesson here is, we can't go back. We can honor the past, yes, but without letting it define the present. In this way, the loneliness of the past transforms from a burden into a memory that lights the way forward. 2. Loneliness from an unrealized future. the call to move forward. On the other hand, there's a kind of loneliness that pushes us ahead. It's the ache of not having yet achieved what we desire, what we dream of, that unsettling feeling that something essential is missing. Love, accomplishment, purpose. This loneliness compels us to imagine a different future, urging us to strive for more. It can be frustrating, but it's also filled with potential. Every step we take toward what we want is a step toward personal growth. However, we must tread carefully. When our happiness relies solely on what we don't yet have, we risk becoming trapped in perpetual dissatisfaction. The key lies in valuing each stage of the journey rather than believing fulfillment exists only in the future. 3. Divine loneliness, the pain of nearing the unattainable. And then there's a type of loneliness that may be the hardest to grasp and accept. Divine loneliness. It's the feeling of being close to something greater, a spiritual purpose, a higher truth, but unable to fully reach it. This proximity can be painful. We sense we are on the brink of revelation, but it never quite arrives. It's like an endless dance between wanting and accepting. Here, the only way forward is through surrender, accepting that some things are beyond our control and that peace comes when we stop resisting what is. Divine loneliness is, in truth, an invitation to a new kind of connection, one that doesn't depend on the external world, but on a deep acceptance of our own existence. Each of these types of loneliness offers us a lesson. The past reminds us of what was, the future calls us toward what could be, and the divine teaches us the importance of simply being. When we recognize these different faces of loneliness, we stop seeing it as an enemy and start embracing it as an ally in our journey of self-knowledge. So, which of these lonelinesses have you experienced? Recognizing loneliness in its various forms is like uncovering pieces of a puzzle about ourselves. Each type points to a specific path, reflecting on the past, moving toward the future, or accepting the divine mystery. But understanding these paths leads to an essential question. How can we integrate them to become our true selves? Carl Jung, one of the greatest figures in psychology, believed that loneliness is far more than just being alone. He saw it as a key to individuation, the process of becoming the most authentic and complete version of ourselves. And this only happens when we overcome the fear of revealing who we truly are. Have you ever felt misunderstood, as if you were speaking a language no one around you understands? That kind of disconnection that lingers even when surrounded by friends, family, or colleagues? Jung described this loneliness as something far deeper than mere physical solitude. He believed that true loneliness occurs when we fail to express our essence and what truly matters to us. It's not about being physically alone, but about the sense that, no matter how hard we try, we can't communicate our true selves to the world. From this perspective, loneliness stops being an obstacle and transforms into a doorway, a passage to individuation, the process of becoming our most authentic and integrated selves. However, this path requires courage. All of us, on some level, seek acceptance and approval, and we often shape ourselves to meet others' expectations to avoid rejection. We adapt opinions, hide feelings, and silence essential parts of who we are. But in doing so, we abandon our true identity and distance ourselves from genuine connection, not just with others, but primarily with ourselves. Jung believed that true freedom and meaningful connections are only possible when we let go of the fear of rejection and show ourselves as we are. Of course, this isn't easy. Exposing our authenticity can be uncomfortable, and we won't always be understood or accepted, but paradoxically, it's only when we overcome this fear and embrace our truth that we can create genuine connections. More importantly, we find an internal foundation that allows us to live with greater integrity. Loneliness, then, can be seen as a calling, In the moments when we are alone, free from the need to meet external expectations, we have the opportunity to look inward and discover what truly matters to us. It's in the silence that we hear our own voices, often drowned out by the noise of the world, and in that process we find a kind of clarity that only solitude can provide. We discover our values, our passions, and begin to see a path that is truly ours. What once seemed like an unbearable burden becomes a space of freedom. When we embrace our loneliness and use it as fertile ground for personal growth, we start to trust ourselves more and break free from expectations that no longer serve us. Loneliness stops being a burden and becomes a powerful ally in building a more authentic and meaningful life. Jung teaches us that individuation is not a fixed destination, but a continuous journey. It's a process of constant discovery and acceptance, where we learn to stay true to ourselves regardless of external circumstances. Loneliness, far from being an enemy, becomes an essential companion on this path, for it is through it that we find the freedom to be who we truly are. And when we allow ourselves this authenticity, we begin to attract deeper connections, those that require no masks or pretenses. Perhaps the loneliness you feel today is an invitation to begin this journey, a silent call to explore your own authenticity and uncover an inner strength you never knew existed. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? The freedom to be ourselves without fear, without reservations. Loneliness, if welcomed, can be the first step in that direction. When we embrace loneliness as a path toward individuation, we discover a strength we never imagined we had. But what if this solitude, when misunderstood or neglected, turns into an invisible weight we carry in our bodies and minds? What happens when internal disconnection lingers and begins to affect not only who we are, but also how we feel physically and emotionally? Loneliness, if not well managed, can come at a high cost. Let's explore how this solitary journey can leave marks not only on the soul, but also on the body, and why learning to cope with loneliness is essential for our health and well-being. You might have felt it yourself. Moments when a lack of connection turns into constant exhaustion, or when repressed emotions feel as heavy as an invisible anchor. Today, science confirms what we may instinctively know. Loneliness can be as harmful as any physical illness. When we feel alone, something profound happens in our bodies. Prolonged isolation triggers what experts call the stress response, a natural reaction to perceived threats. But unlike an immediate danger, such as fleeing from a wild animal, loneliness is a threat that doesn't fade over time. It builds up, and the body, unsure of how to process it, remains on high alert. This leads to an overload of stress hormones like cortisol, which directly affects our health. This continuous state of alert has real, measurable impacts. Our immune system weakens, making us more vulnerable to illnesses and infections. Studies show that people who experience long-term loneliness are at a higher risk of developing chronic diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, and cardiovascular problems. Loneliness can also trigger silent inflammation, which erodes the body from within, often without us realizing it. It's not just the body that suffers. Mental health is directly impacted by loneliness. The absence of meaningful connection can trap us in a vicious cycle where sadness and anxiety become constant companions. Without a safe space to express emotions, they accumulate, like a pressure cooker on the verge of exploding. It's no surprise that loneliness is closely associated with depression, insomnia, and other mental health disorders. What makes it even more challenging is that loneliness isn't resolved merely by the presence of others. We can be surrounded by crowds and still feel painfully alone. It's the quality of connections that matters, not the quantity. We need spaces where we can feel truly seen and heard, where we can be ourselves without masks or judgment. This internal and external disconnection demands our attention. Learning to recognize our emotions, giving space to them, and seeking meaningful connections are essential steps to restoring balance. Ignoring or suppressing what we feel will inevitably have consequences, and sooner or later, our bodies will send warning signals. This is why finding a balance between moments of solitude and meaningful connections is crucial for our overall health. Loneliness doesn't have to be an enemy, but we need to learn to listen to it. It can be a signal that something inside us needs attention, an invitation to care more deeply for who we are and what we need. In the end, dealing with loneliness isn't just an emotional matter. It's an act of care for our minds and bodies. And you? Are you listening to what your body tries to tell you in moments of silence? Understanding how loneliness affects not just our emotions, but also our physical health leads us to an essential question: how do we find balance? We need moments of introspection to know ourselves, but also meaningful connections to thrive. So how do we walk that delicate line between being alone and being with others? The secret lies in recognizing that solitude and companionship are not opposites, but complements. Two sides of the same coin that together help us build a more authentic and healthy life. We live in a world that often values constant connection. Messages, notifications, meetings, and social media give us the illusion that being always available is the same as being connected. But does this overdose of company truly serve us? And is loneliness always a problem to be solved? The truth is, neither complete isolation nor constant interaction is healthy. Well-being lies in striking a balance between these two worlds. Solitude can be incredibly powerful when used as a moment of pause and reconnection with ourselves. It allows us to hear our own voice amidst the external noise and reflect on what we feel and need. It's a space of freedom where we don't have to meet anyone's expectations. However, staying too long in this bubble can disconnect us from the world around us, causing us to miss opportunities for learning and growth through relationships. On the other hand, companionship enriches our lives. Meaningful conversations, shared laughter, and special moments with others are essential for our mental and emotional well-being. Connecting with others reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles and that we belong to something greater. But constant interaction without introspection can leave us drained, our energy scattered in attempts to please and keep up with others. The key to a balanced life is recognizing when we need each of these experiences. There are times when we need to withdraw and be silent to reorganize internally. And there are times when we need to open ourselves to others, seeking support, joy, and inspiration. It's not about choosing between being alone or accompanied, but about learning to dance between these two states. This balance is deeply personal. What works for one person may not work for another. Some people need more time alone to recharge, while others find renewal through social contact. The important thing is to listen to our own signals and adjust the rhythm according to our changing needs throughout life. Being alone isn't a problem, just as seeking companionship isn't a weakness. The secret is knowing when we need one and when we need the other. This requires self-awareness and courage to set healthy boundaries, both with others and with ourselves. It's okay to say no when we need time for ourselves, just as there's no shame in asking for support when we crave connection. The dance between solitude and connection is dynamic. In some moments, isolation strengthens us. In others, interaction nourishes us. The most important thing is to allow ourselves to experience both without guilt or fear. When we learn to balance these experiences, we find a more authentic and meaningful life, one where we can be who we truly are, both in moments of silence and in moments of connection. And you? Can you tell when it's time to retreat and when it's time to connect? After all, finding this balance is what allows us to live with more presence, lightness, and freedom. As we learn to dance between solitude and companionship, we begin to understand that every moment has its purpose. But this search for balance is not a modern invention. Throughout history, great thinkers and spiritual traditions have explored the value of solitude as a powerful tool for personal growth and transformation. What they discovered can help us view solitude not as a burden, but as a gateway to a more authentic and enlightened life. Great minds in philosophy and spirituality have always seen solitude as something deeper than merely being away from others. For many, isolation was not just a refuge, but an essential practice to reach a higher level of understanding of oneself and the world. They believed that, in silence, we find a truth inaccessible when we are surrounded by distractions. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, for example, saw solitude as a means to escape society's animosity and rediscover peace in the simplicity of nature. In his moments of isolation, he not only distanced himself from social pressures, but also found space to reconnect with what truly mattered to him. For Rousseau, nature was a silent mirror where he could reflect on his own existence and better understand his role in the world. Nietzsche, on the other hand, viewed solitude as a path of radical detachment. For him, being alone was a way to free oneself from social conventions and the slave morality that, in his view, imprisoned the individual's true essence. Solitude, in this context, was an act of courage, a space where a person could create new values and live according to their own truth, without being suffocated by societal expectations. Buddhism offers an even deeper perspective. Buddha taught that solitude is an essential pillar for enlightenment. He encouraged people to temporarily withdraw from social life to meditate and observe the transient nature of all things. Through the practice of silence, Buddhists learn to let go of attachments and ego illusions, creating space for a broader understanding of reality. In this case, solitude is not seen as an escape, but as a path to awakening. These traditions show us that solitude can be a great ally in our search for authenticity and meaning. It is in solitude that we find clarity to reorganize our thoughts, freedom to create new meanings, and courage to be true to who we really are. By allowing ourselves moments of isolation, we open space to grow more fully and consciously. In the end, these lessons teach us that solitude does not need to be avoided, but embraced as an essential part of the human experience. It is an opportunity to deconstruct what no longer serves us and build a new way of living, a way that reflects who we truly are. Just as Rousseau found peace in nature, Nietzsche forged new values, and Buddha reached enlightenment, we too can use solitude as a portal to a more authentic, meaningful, and complete life. And what about you? Have you ever thought of solitude as an ally? Maybe it's waiting for the right moment to guide you to something greater. When we look at what philosophers and spiritual traditions have taught us, we realize that solitude has a transformative dimension. But there's something even deeper in this experience. The moment when solitude transforms into solitude, in the richer sense of the word, solitude as intentional aloneness. At this point, we are no longer just separated from others. We are free from external pressures, expectations, and the constant need for validation. Solitude is not emptiness, but a space filled with peace and clarity. And it is in this state that we find the true essence of detachment. There is a subtle yet powerful difference between loneliness and solitude. While loneliness often carries the weight of lack of company, connection, or belonging, solitude is a choice. It is the moment when being alone stops being an imposed condition and becomes a conscious decision. And in this state, something incredible arises. The freedom to be exactly who we are, without the need to please or meet anyone's expectations. When we allow ourselves to enter solitude, we discover that many of the pressures we feel in life stem from the desire for others' approval. It's as if we carry a backpack full of others' judgments, social expectations, and standards we didn't choose, but that were imposed on us. In solitude, we set that backpack aside. Finally, we can breathe without the weight of what we should be or do. This process of detachment is liberating, but it doesn't happen immediately. It requires practice and courage. We are so used to measuring our worth by others' opinions that at first it can be uncomfortable to be alone with our own thoughts. But it is precisely in this discomfort that the magic happens. By accepting that we don't need constant validation, we find a new source of strength, confidence in ourselves. In solitude, we discover that our worth is not dependent on achievements or others' approval. We learn that it is possible to be happy with who we are and what we have without needing to prove anything to anyone. It is a state of inner peace that comes from understanding that we are enough, exactly as we are. This doesn't mean abandoning relationships or no longer valuing others' company. On the contrary, solitude teaches us to set healthy boundaries and seek more genuine connections. When we feel complete within, we stop seeking from others what we've already found in ourselves. And so our relationships become more authentic, based on mutual exchange rather than need. The detachment that solitude offers is, in fact, a form of self-love. It is the understanding that we don't need to be perfect or please everyone to be worthy of love and respect. And ironically, it's when we let go of the need for acceptance that we become more open to living fully and building meaningful relationships. In solitude, we also discover that inner peace does not depend on external circumstances. It is a state of being that we can cultivate at any moment, anywhere. By freeing ourselves from expectations and connecting with our true essence, we find a source of tranquility that cannot be shaken by what happens outside. Thus, solitude is not just about being alone, it's about being at peace with ourselves. It's the freedom to live on our own terms, without fear of what others might think or expect. And it is in this state that we find the true power of detachment, the certainty that no matter the circumstances, we are enough. So, how about taking a step towards solitude? Perhaps in silence, you will discover a strength and peace you never imagined finding. After all, freedom begins when we learn to be at peace with ourselves, without needing anything more. When we connect with solitude and free ourselves from external expectations, something profound happens. We begin to see ourselves as the protagonists of our own story. No longer hostages to others' demands, we take responsibility for who we are and who we aspire to become. In this way, solitude starts to resemble something familiar in the narratives that have always inspired us: the hero's journey. In ancient myths and modern stories, there is a moment when the hero must withdraw, face darkness, and find the truth about themselves alone. Could it be that we are also on our own heroic journey? Think of any hero story that has resonated with you: Odysseus sailing through unknown seas, Batman facing lonely nights in Gotham, Frodo crossing dangerous lands, burdened by a ring that only he can carry. What do all these characters have in common? At some point, each of them faces solitude, and it is this experience that transforms them into who they need to be. Solitude is not just a coincidence in their stories, it is a rite of passage. It is in the absence of company and support that the hero is forced to confront their deepest fears, limitations, and doubts. When the outside world can no longer provide answers, they must look within and find their own truth. And in doing so, they not only overcome challenges, they transform. But this journey is not exclusive to myths and fables. In some way, we are all on our own heroic quest. Life constantly presents us with moments of solitude that feel difficult to bear, but are, in reality, disguised invitations to self-knowledge and transformation. It is in these moments that we discover strengths we never knew we had, because, like the hero, we are stronger than we think. The hero's path is indeed solitary, but it is not a purposeless one. It is in isolation that the potential to create something new emerges, a new identity, a new way of seeing the world, and a new way of living. Just as Odysseus had to leave home to understand what it truly meant to belong, and Batman had to isolate himself to confront his pain and turn it into purpose, we also need these moments of distance to discover who we really are. Solitude, then, is more than just a difficult phase. It is an opportunity for rebirth. The hero returns changed from when they departed. They carry with them wisdom that was only possible to gain because they had the courage to face the darkness alone. And it is this courage that turns solitude into a source of power, the power to become the best version of oneself. The journey may be challenging, but we are not truly alone. Every step we take towards self-knowledge brings us closer to a deeper understanding of life and our purpose. And just as the hero finds unexpected allies along the way, we too find more authentic connections when we allow ourselves to be who we really are. In the end, solitude is not the conclusion of the journey. It is the means through which we transform and prepare for something greater. It is a necessary stage for those who seek not just to survive, but to evolve. Like the hero who returns changed, carrying a new vision, we also emerge from these moments stronger, more aware, and better prepared to face whatever comes our way. So, when solitude knocks at your door, remember, perhaps it is not an enemy, but a disguised mentor, guiding you toward your own greatness. The question is, are you ready to step into the role of the hero in your own life? Just as every hero returns transformed after facing solitude, we too are invited to be reborn through this internal journey. Solitude is not just a passing phase, but a constant opportunity for growth, a reminder that we can live aligned with who we truly are. And what happens when, instead of resisting, we accept solitude as an inevitable part of life? That acceptance might be the key to a lighter and more authentic existence, a life where the most important thing is not to please the world, but to connect with our essence. We live in a time when we are constantly pressured to show results, please others, and meet expectations that don't always make sense to us. But what if the secret to a more fulfilling life lies precisely in not trying to please? What if, instead of seeking external validation, we chose to embrace who we really are, with all our imperfections, doubts, and peculiarities? Solitude may initially feel like a heavy burden, but it is in solitude that we find the most honest answers about ourselves. When we allow ourselves to sit in silence, free from the interference of the outside world, we discover what truly matters to us. The masks fall, and we realize that the only validation that matters is our own. Being alone is not a weakness. It is a courageous choice. Authenticity is born from acceptance. Accepting our fears, imperfections, and the certainty that we will not always be understood is the first step. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we release the weight of expectations and embrace the freedom to live by our own values. This doesn't mean we will stop seeking connection, but rather that our relationships will become more genuine, based on true exchange rather than the need for approval. It takes courage to walk this path because authenticity often puts us at odds with what the world expects. However, the closer we get to our truth, the lighter life becomes. We shed the burden of pretending to be someone we are not and free ourselves to live on our own terms. And surprisingly, it is in this process that we attract people and experiences that resonate with our essence. Accepting solitude as a part of life does not mean we will always be alone. It means we will no longer fear those moments of distance because we know they are opportunities for reconnecting with ourselves. Solitude is like a necessary pause to recharge the soul and realign with our purpose. The more we learn to navigate these moments with serenity, the stronger our connection with our true self becomes. In the end, being authentic is an act of self-love. It is telling ourselves that we are enough, exactly as we are. That we don't need to mold ourselves to others' expectations to be worthy of respect and happiness. Authenticity is liberating because it allows us to live a life that is truly ours, a life where choices are made from the heart and not under the pressure to please. So how about making peace with solitude? How about accepting it as an ally that brings you closer to who you really are? By embracing it, we create space for growth, freedom, and above all, inner peace. Because living authentically is, above all, living lightly, in harmony with our essence and at peace with the world around us. And in the end, isn't that what we all seek? The freedom to be ourselves without fear, without reservations, and with the certainty that true happiness arises from this deep connection with who we really are.